In 1946, one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in American history, the OSS, the direct predecessor to the CIA, opened a classified investigation. Not into a living enemy, not into an active threat, into a dead man. A man they themselves had declared dead. The question they were asking wasn't, did Subhas Chandra Bose survive the plane crash? The question was, what do we do if he did? This is the Donovan Report, and it changes everything about how we understand the Bose mystery. Before we get into the report itself, you need to understand who was doing the watching, because context is everything in intelligence history. William Joseph Donovan was not a bureaucrat. He was a war hero, a Wall Street lawyer, and by the early 1940s, the director of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. Think of the OSS as the wartime skeleton of what would eventually become the Central Intelligence Agency. It ran covert operations, recruited spies, produced strategic intelligence assessments, and reported directly to President Roosevelt. These were not amateurs. These were people who had spent the war years running agents behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied Europe, destabilizing Japanese operations across Southeast Asia, and building the architecture of modern American espionage from scratch. When the OSS took an interest in someone, it wasn't idle curiosity, it was strategic calculation. They tracked people because those people mattered to American interests, to the global balance of power, to the plans Washington
was drawing up for the post-war world. And in 1946, with World War II just ended, with the British Empire beginning to crack at its seams, and with India sitting at the center of the most significant political transformation of the 20th century, the OSS turned its full attention to one name, Subhas Chandra Bose. Now, if you're an espionage buff, you likely already know the broad outline, but let's sharpen the picture, because the specific reasons America feared Bose are more nuanced than most accounts acknowledge. Subhas Chandra Bose was not simply an Indian nationalist. By 1943, he was the commander of the Indian National Army, a force of over 40,000 soldiers recruited largely from Indian prisoners of war held by the Japanese.
He had broadcast directly to the Indian subcontinent over Azad Hind Radio. He had declared a provisional government of free India. He had personally met with both Hitler and Tojo, and he had demonstrated something that deeply unnerved Western strategic planners: the ability to build mass loyalty that crossed regional, religious, and linguistic lines in South Asia. That last point is crucial. The British were navigating the endgame of Indian independence with every intention of shaping what came after, which factions would hold power, which leaders would be manageable, what kind of India would emerge. The Americans, meanwhile, were building their own post-war vision, a world of open markets, anti-communist alliances, and strategic partnerships in Asia. Bose fit into neither vision. He was fiercely anti-British.
Yes, but he was equally suspicious of American intentions. He was not a communist, but he had no interest in becoming a piece on Washington's chessboard. His ideology was something the Cold War binary couldn't contain, and that made him uniquely dangerous. A living Bose returning to India in the chaotic summer of 1946 would have been a wildfire. The official account has always been this. On August 18, 1945, Subhas Chandra Bose boarded a Japanese bomber at Taihoku Airfield in Taiwan. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff. Bose suffered severe burns. He died in a Japanese military hospital hours later. He was cremated. His ashes were taken to Tokyo's Renkoji Temple, where they remain to this day. 3 separate Indian government commissions have investigated this over the decades. Two concluded
he died in the crash. One, the Mukherjee Commission of 2005, concluded he did not, and that the ashes at Renkoji are not his. But here is what most people miss. The debate over whether Bose died has always obscured a more interesting question. And that question is this: why, in 1946, was the OSS still actively building an intelligence file on a man officially dead for nearly a year? Agencies don't do that for historical interest. They don't allocate post-war resources to tracking ghosts out of nostalgia. If the Donovan-era OSS was running active assessments on Bose's whereabouts and potential reemergence, it means their analysts, people paid to cut through noise and assess real probabilities, were not convinced the plane crash story was closed. The OSS documentation on Bose, portions of which have surfaced through declassification requests over the years, reveals a striking operational posture. The framing is not retrospective, it is anticipatory. The reports don't read like post-mortems, they read like threat assessments. Analysts were modeling scenarios. What would Bose's return to India mean for British withdrawal timelines? Which political factions would rally to him? What would his relationship with the Soviet Union look like given his earlier Axis alliance and his known pragmatism about international alliances? Could he credibly claim leadership of a post-independence government? There is also significant attention paid to sightings. Reports were filed and taken seriously enough to be forwarded up the chain of individuals who claimed to have seen Bose or to have received information suggesting he was alive and moving. Through Soviet-controlled territory, the USSR angle was particularly alarming to American planners. If Bose had survived, reached Soviet soil, whether voluntarily or through Soviet extraction, he would have been an extraordinary asset for Moscow, a charismatic, anti-British, anti-American leader with a mass following in the most populous democracy on Earth. The Soviets, notably, have never fully declassified their own files on Bose. That silence has its own weight. Here is the reframe that makes the Donovan Report so historically significant and why it deserves more attention than the standard "did he survive" narrative. For decades, the Bose mystery has been framed as a question of biography. Did he live or die? Where are the real ashes? What happened on that runway in Taiwan? The Donovan Report forces us to ask
A different kind of question, a geopolitical one. Not what happened to Bose, but what did the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in the world think might happen because of Bose? And the answer reveals something remarkable about the man's stature. In 1946, with the war won and the OSS winding down its wartime operations, with hundreds of real, active, living threats demanding resources and attention, American intelligence was still devoting analytical bandwidth to one possibility: that Subhas Chandra Bose was out there, that he might come back, and that if he did, the entire strategic architecture the Western powers were constructing for post-colonial Asia could be upended by a single man's return. That is not the file they open on someone who is simply dead. That is the file they open on someone they are afraid of. Pull back the lens for a moment, because the Donovan Report doesn't exist in isolation. It is one data point in a much larger pattern of Western anxiety about the shape of decolonization. 1946 is a hinge year. The British are preparing to leave India. The question of partition is building toward its catastrophic conclusion. The Muslim League and the Congress are locked in political warfare, and every major power, Britain, America, the Soviet Union, is running calculations about what a post-British South Asia means for their own interests. Into that environment, reintroduce Subhas Chandra Bose, a leader who had already demonstrated he could build cross-community support, who had an army, who had international visibility, who had proven his willingness to form alliances with anyone including former enemies if it advanced Indian independence. He was not a man who would have accepted a partition that he believed was engineered by London. He was not a man who would have quietly aligned with Washington's Cold War framework. The OSS analysts knew this, and their reports reflect it. The concern wasn't merely that Bose was alive. The concern was that Bose alive in 1946, in the context of Indian independence, was an uncontrollable variable in a situation that every major power was desperately trying to control. That is why they were watching. That is what the Donovan Report is really about. So where does this leave us? The crash in Taiwan may well have happened exactly as described. Bose may have died exactly when and where the official record says he did. But the Donovan Report establishes something that no amount of speculation can take away. In the judgment
of America's foremost intelligence professionals, operating with access to sources and methods unavailable to any journalist or historian, the question was not settled. The threat, real or hypothetical, was treated as active. And that tells you more about Subhas Chandra Bose than almost any biography can. Not what he did, not where he went, but what he represented to the people who ran the world in 1946. A man so capable of disrupting the established order that even the possibility of his survival had to be monitored, assessed, and prepared for. The great powers of that era feared a lot of things. They feared atomic weapons in the wrong hands. They feared Soviet expansion. They feared the unraveling of colonial order across 3 continents. And somewhere in that list, in a classified file marked for the eyes of William Donovan, they feared one man coming back from the dead. Think about that. If this kind of deep dive intelligence history is what you're here for, subscribe, because we are just getting started.